talking all things politics this morning. Firstly, a big old welcome to the show, Bryce.
Hi, Di, Morena.
Yeah, now let's talk about some of the big things that happened this week, and one of those things being the first big policy announcement from Labor. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yes, so Labor's been criticised a bit lately for not having enough policy. It's criticising, the government, and that's what oppositions do. But, the challenge for Labor has been, well, what would you do differently? What are your
Mm.
ideas for that are different from this government's? And so the leader of Labor, Chris Hipkins, and his finance spokesperson, Barbara Edmonds, set out their big new policy. I think it was on Tuesday, and it was called a future fund. So what they want to do once they're back in government is to set up a particular fund that's kind of ring fenced from politics that they will start off by putting $200 million into, and they will also put all the dividends from the companies that they own, because of course governments own various, or they half own the energy companies, the Air New Zealand, and a few other things,
Mm.
and put the profits from that into this fund that would then invest in other companies and would grow, and it would become a bit of a bank account really for New Zealand's future. And so, this was kind of sold as a big visionary policy. It's not entirely a new one. It's been talked about for quite a while. And in fact, New Zealand First already announced something similar a year or so ago. But it immediately got a lot of criticism because it wasn't a lot of details. It was seen as quite vague, and people weren't entirely sure how it was going to work, and Labor couldn't really answer those things. So the jury's out on whether this is a bold, inspiring new thing, or whether it's a bit of, I don't know, just electioneering, really.
I mean, is this a sign of things to come? We're a year out from the next election, which seems crazy to say, but, will we start hearing more of these policies coming out from Labor and other parties?
Yeah, I think so. Look, Labor desperately want to get back into government, but they need to show that they've got something to offer. And, a big part of Labor's strategy is to let the government make mistakes, and for the public to get maybe bored and tired of Christopher Luxon and his ministers. So it's what's seen as kind of a small target strategy where Labor try to keep relatively quiet, and they just hope that the government will essentially be voted out, and they'll be ready there as the new government. And that's kind of worked well for them in the last year or two, but there's a bit of grumpiness, I think, especially from their own supporters, saying, well, that's all fine to criticise the government, we agree, but can you give us some confidence that you're actually going to do anything better? And
Mm.
so, yes, they are now having to put out some announcements. There's another one coming in, I believe, the next few weeks about tax. And this is a big one for Labor. It's about changing the tax system, maybe bringing in a capital gains tax or a wealth tax to allow, I don't know, to be able to pay for some of those public services that are seen to be underfunded at the moment, health, education, etc.
Do you think this is the appetite of the public as well, in that because the world seems a little unstable at the moment, because there's all of these sort of threats around to say employment, our budgets, that actually we kind of need sort of hopeful ideas of what change could look like? Do you think that's sort of
Yeah.
behind a lot of
Look,
maybe the criticism?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about it. We're in a very fluctuating situation around the world and in New Zealand. So many challenges for whatever governments are in power, and certainly New Zealand. Yeah, we've got some um, pretty grim-looking economic um, statistics at the moment in terms of the inflation rate went up this week. It was announced that it's up to 3%. We've got high unemployment, low growth. We've got a lot of people heading overseas now Australia in particular. So, yeah, I think New Zealanders are wanting to see some sort of good news or new ideas. And and I think the criticism is that, yeah, both sides of politics are lacking these at the moment. They're
Mm,
a bit
mm.
kind of deer in the headlights, not knowing how to fix these things. Of course, the government's going to tell us, keep it slow and steady, we'll make some incremental changes, brighter days are coming. Whether that's, well, if you look at the opinion polls, it's not really convincing that many swing voters. And so Labor now are trying to win over those swing voters, saying, yes, we've got some ideas, we've got some new policies.
So let's take a look at the left because they're not in government at the moment. You know, we've looked at Labor. What about the other parties and what's the sort of
Yeah.
general state there?
Well, I mean, we've really got quite a clear situation in politics now, which hasn't always been the case, of a left bloc and a right bloc. So on the right, we've got the parties of government, New Zealand First, ACT, and National, and on the left, you've got Labour as the biggest opposition party on the left, the Greens, who are quite in sync with Labour, but then you've got Te Pāti Māori, which is a bit more complicated, and so there's been a sense that these three parties can work together. They can put together a coalition that differentiates itself from the national-led one at the next election. But there's always doubts about whether the smaller parties might be the tail that wags the dog. And so people worry. I think there'll be people that want to vote Labour but might worry that the Greens, or especially Te Pāti Māori, might be a bigger kind of force that will push a future left government into strange areas in policy terms. But then, particularly with with Te Pāti Māori, they've had their own huge turmoil over the last few weeks,
Mm.
and that never gives voters a lot of confidence. And I think there'll be a lot of Māori voters that are thinking again about Te Pāti Māori. Is this a stable party? Can we have confidence in a party that's infighting and
Mm.
having lots of bitter sort of differences, but also some of those centrist or swing voters that maybe voted National or New Zealand First at the last election and are thinking, oh, well, maybe we'll try Labour this time. But does that mean everything's going to be chaotic because of Te Pāti Māori or the Greens? So that's the real challenge for the left at the moment, is kind
Mm.
of finding some stability, some unity, and that's going to, I think, dog them for the next year if they don't quickly come up with something.
Before we wrap up, Bryce, of course, a big thing over the last few weeks, a couple of weeks in particular, Jim Bolger passing away. And of course, yesterday was the funeral. I just wonder if we could sort of finish with that and perhaps his
Yeah.
legacy.
Oh, look, the funeral was yesterday. I think there's been a remarkable sense of, I don't know, politicians, political commentators in the
Yep.
media really giving tribute to Jim Bolger and some of the things that he stood for. I think if it was just the case of us looking at Jim Bolger's life in terms of when he was Prime Minister, 1990 to 1998, there would not be the kind of really positive tributes because those were quite, or at least some of those years were quite difficult. And
Mm.
Bolger was very unpopular in those first years of being Prime Minister. But he actually kind of had two public lives. Yes, he was in politics for many years, but then after he retired from politics, which was what, around 1999, he was actually played a big role in public life. He, in particular, kept doing some jobs for the public service in terms of he was New Zealand's ambassador to the United States for a few years. He ran Kiwi New Zealand Post and Kiwi Bank. But in my view, one of his greatest roles was as a kind of commentator on public life. He wasn't one of those people that just retired quietly and kept his opinions to himself. He really thought quite deep and meaningful about the life of New Zealand and what it had become. And as you'll know, he was a very he had an in-depth Catholicism that I think really had a lot of influence on him, especially those later years, because he actually saw a lot of problems in New Zealand that he thought New Zealand needed to address, especially the way that society had broken down a lot. We were becoming too individualized. There was a lot of inequality, a lot of social deprivation that he found quite concerning, and he spoke out on that quite a lot. And I think that's why, in the end, when he was buried yesterday, there was actually a lot of sense from left and right of what an important person he has been to New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, thank you for that, Bryce. Talking
Thanks,
today
Di.
with Dr. Bryce Edwards from the Integrity Institute, the director there. Thanks again once again for being on the show.
Thanks, Di.
Thanks for joining us on Rhema. Now, if you found value in today's content, hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel with the subscribe button. This really helps us to continue to produce more quality content for you. And hey, if you'd like to stay updated and never miss any of our future videos, ring that notification bell as well. Don't forget to follow us on our other socials, which are in the description below. And until then, stay tuned.